Self-love is an act of rebellion. It is a political act. It is an act of resistance. Self-love is not just having positive self-esteem. Self-love is an active act of rebellion, and it is the only way, in my opinion, that you can neutralize all of the different isms and all of the other forces of evil that surround us. So I'm going to be talking about that in this episode, and I also share a few resources that I will talk about, one of which is my website, ravenkushner.com, on which I sell fine art prints and products, and also original artwork. The original artwork will be coming later on this year as I'm building my portfolio. The prints and the products are up and ready to go. Another resource that I share in the podcast is Artprof. They are a nonprofit organization, totally free, and they're perfect for somebody who is interested in art and wanting to learn more. I don't have any kind of an affiliate relationship with them. I just love them so much. And another resource that I share is the book I See Color by Robert Pellegrino, so I will provide a link to that as well. And if you have any questions about anything, any of the topics that I bring up in the show, I welcome you to send in your questions. The link will be in the description. It is going to be questions@ravenkushner.com. You can write me there and ask me anything about the stuff that I bring up in the show today, or ask an unrelated question that I will answer in a future episode. So stay tuned for that. Hello and welcome back to the show. This is Love, Not Tolerance, where every week I will be talking about my work and sharing what it has taught me about life. My name is Raven Burns Kushner. I am a fine art painter. I paint the world that I want to see, and I celebrate underrepresented beauty. So let's get into this week's lesson. Stay tuned. All right, so let's get into it. So what I learned this week, both from doing my own work and from the book that I'm currently reading, is that self-love is so much more than people make it out to be. It's almost become a cliche by this point, because it's been kind of bandied about the media so much. Self-love, self-esteem. It's even gotten to the point where it's starting to get mocked, where people talk about self-esteem as if it's really not necessary and people are just lazy and need to work hard and things of that nature. But self-love is a weapon. Self-love is a radical political act that is the only way I know of to neutralize outside evil. Now that's a powerful statement, but I 100% believe that. And why do I believe that? I believe that because there are so many forces, and not as an aside, but as a keynote, the book that I'm reading is about racism. But this doesn't apply just to racism. This is all the isms. What those things are designed to do is to strip you of your personal power, to stick you into a box so that you are non-threatening and ineffectual, and that the powers that be do not have to worry about you. Okay, this is why self-love is a weapon, the only effective weapon, I believe, in your own self-defense. Yes, you can protest. Yes, you can vote. Those things are all very important. But when it comes to long-lasting, effective change and neutralizing the threat that all the isms have toward you, the only real effective thing to do is to practice radical self-love. Now, I kind of stumbled upon this lesson when I was working on a project. I'm currently taking some art classes through various places, one of which is Artprof. Artprof.org. They are an amazing organization that offers free classes in art and also art talks, business and art, and all the different facets of art. So I'm doing their portrait track right now. And one of the prompts, they provide some prompts to get your creative thinking going. One of the prompts was to create a portrait that uses unusual colors. And they provided some references that you could choose from, some photographs and things like that. So it gave you a lot of leeway to come up with your own composition. So I chose 2 Black women as my references. And I started thinking about, well, what colors do I want to use for this portrait that are unusual? So I decided to use pink as the predominant color in the portrait. And the reason why I chose pink is because of all of the associations that pink has with femininity. Now, what racism has tried to do is to strip Black women of their femininity, to convince the world that we are not real women, that we are strong, quote unquote. We can take all the abuse that we are recipients of, and we just keep going like batteries that just don't quit. Even men, believe that. Even men of our own group tend to believe that. It is not true. Women of all kinds are precious, and they are built differently than men, of course. And it's primarily because of hormones and our ability to bear children. But that creates a sense of nurturing, a sense of community, a sense of thoughtfulness, a gentleness, and that applies to Black women as well. Now, human beings are resilient, so when you are made to suffer or made to go through some sort of physical incapacity, the body and the human spirit is capable of, being resilient, figuring out some other way to live and to get things done. But this is not ideal, and this is not the original nature. So Black women are just as feminine as any other woman. We love our children. We cry when we're hurt. We love beautiful things, just like any other woman. And yes, those are stereotypes, but those are based, and so not every woman obviously fits those criteria. But in general, this is how women are, and this is also how Black women are. But as I said, the media wants to present us as strong, as almost like men, and it's very offensive, and it's just a way of justifying our treatment. So I chose to make this painting in mostly soft pastel colors to reflect, and the women were not of standard and typical beauty. One was a little bit overweight, and the other one, she was beautiful, but she had more of a strong jaw, more of a Grace Jones type of a beauty. But there is still femininity there. There is the reference to the clouds and to heaven, because most Black women are praying women. And that's another thing I was thinking, is that atheism is more of a luxury for the white population, mainly because people that suffer, and that is most of the populations of the world, people that are actually going through life and death time situations, people that survival is not presumed, tend to be more reliant on a higher power. And most Black women are praying women. So I included the images of the heavens and the clouds along with the pink coloring to reflect that femininity. But I started thinking about how important it is to love yourself first and foremost. So many times we, as women and as people who are compassionate of all genders, we sometimes put people ahead of ourselves because we think that that's what we're supposed to do, that we're going to receive some sort of a reward at some point for doing this. And then sometimes it's just a lack of self-esteem. We just kind of think that everyone else is more important than us. But nothing could be further from the truth. Your primary and really your own main responsibility is to take care of yourself. Now, you may be given children, you may be given other tasks that are important to take care of, but first and foremost, your job is to take care of you, because if you don't, you cannot be your maximum self, and you compromise your ability to take care of other people. So, and the way this relates to the book that I'm reading, and the book that I'm reading is called I See Color: Identifying, Understanding, and Reducing Our Hidden Racism, A White Perspective, by Robert L. Pellegrino. Now, the book is really good because he goes through a lot of stories discussing how he has come to accept and realize the extent of racism in America. He grew up in a typical white middle-class family where race was kind of just not discussed, but racism was the underlying and underpinning belief system in the home. And he really didn't understand the extent of this until he started dating a Black woman. And he recounts, one of the stories he recounts is wanting to invite this young lady to his home for Thanksgiving so that they could be together and so that his family could meet her and so on and so forth. Like any other relationship that you care about somebody and you want your family to meet them. Well, his family, particularly his father, said no, out of respect for the family, quote unquote, which is meaningless. That just means we're all racist and we don't want to stop being racist, so she can't come. And so this was very distressing to him because he couldn't understand why somebody that he cared about would not be welcome in his home. And this was not somebody who was on drugs or who was a loser. She was an intelligent and beautiful woman that he wanted to share Thanksgiving with. So after a lot of drama, they finally relented and allowed this woman to come to Thanksgiving. Now, I was thinking, if I were that lady, I would not come, even after being allowed, quote unquote, to come. Why? Because it's not just about people accepting you. It's about you accepting other people. And I don't believe that people's personalities and their flawed, toxic traits, I don't believe that those just stay contained within the person. I believe that they are as contagious as a physical disease. So if someone had the flu, you wouldn't want to go around them, not because you don't like them, not because you hate them, but because you don't want to catch the flu. And so in my opinion, toxic people are similar. Toxicity is catching and it's like secondhand smoke. So you may love a smoker, you may like a smoker, but if you hang around a smoker, you're going to get secondhand smoke and all of the detriments that come with that. So I believe that if you spend time with toxic people of any kind, racists included, that it is difficult to impossible not to be affected in some way, either to become racist yourself, or in this young lady's case, to subject yourself to people that are not good people. Now, that's a debatable term that I just said, not good people, because certainly you can have good traits and be a racist. You can perhaps be nice to other white people. Maybe you are a decent citizen. Maybe you don't steal or murder. So in that sense, you are a good person. But if you hate somebody that's not done anything wrong to you, you aren't a good person. I'm sorry, that's just the truth. So if I were this young lady, I wouldn't attend because I would not want somebody else's mental illness to affect my good time. And what I would have said to my boyfriend is, you know, baby, if you want to go to a restaurant with me and have us a nice Thanksgiving, I'm all for that. But I would rather stay home and watch movies by myself than to put myself around people that look at me as somehow inferior to them for no other reason than the shade of my skin. But I also started thinking about how much racism and narcissism have in common. Now, I won't go into all of my history right now. I'm sure I will at some point, but I was in love with a narcissist for years, thinking that things would change, for years thinking that if only I explained things a particular way, if only I did this, that, and the other, that somehow this person would see the error of their ways and we could have a normal and happy relationship. But these are the things that I learned about racism, and I was shocked and interested to see how many of them have traits in common with racism. Number one is grandiose thinking. So racism is defined as believing that your own race is superior, just innately superior to that of other people. Now, racism doesn't mean prejudice. Racism does not mean that you don't like somebody. That doesn't matter. I mean, certainly there's always going to be people you do and don't like. That has nothing to do with anything. What racism is, and it's beyond just not liking a certain group. Racism is the ideology, the fantasy, and the delusion that your race, just your race, is superior than other people. That is an extraordinarily arrogant way to think, but it is baked into the history and all of the institutions of America. So it is understandable why the dominant culture would just think that, because it's not a conscious thing. I talked a lot about the subconscious in my series on Think and Grow Rich, the book by Napoleon Hill. And so a lot of the things that we pick up are, positive and negative beliefs are usually just that. They're just picked up from the social milieu, and they aren't things that we're consciously thinking. But this is grandiose thinking at its core, to believe that you are just naturally and inherently better than someone else, and that gives you the right to deny them access to jobs, to deny them fair housing, to chase them out of your neighborhood, to not allow them in your home, all of these things. Grandiose thinking is a key quality of narcissism, and it is a key quality of racism. Number two is entitlement. Narcissists are extraordinarily entitled people. They believe that just by the very nature of them being them, that they have rights over other people, that they should never be inconvenienced, but it's perfectly okay for other people to be inconvenienced, that just by nature of them being born, they have the right to do whatever it is they want to do. And it is reasonable, they think, for other people to just go along with that, and they can't understand when people don't. This is a key feature of racism. So people that are infected with white racism are entitled. They believe that they should be treated better than other people. They question when someone of a different race, especially Black people, receives some sort of an honor or some sort of a blessing. They immediately protect themselves by thinking, well, that person probably stole it, or that person was probably given some sort of unfair advantage, ignoring all of the unfair advantages that they're given at birth. An example of that is a friend who was telling me, he's African American, and he was telling me that another friend of his who's African American had bought a Mercedes, which they bought out of their salary like anyone else buys a Mercedes. But a coworker walked up to him and asked him how he was able to afford that. Now, he wouldn't have asked him that, most likely, if he were white, because that's a nonsensical question. You can afford it the same way anyone else affords something. You have the money to go do it. Entitlement. Number three is gaslighting. Now, this one is extraordinarily crazy-making. Gaslighting is when you basically deny someone else's reality and you just inform them that the experience that they are having is not actually happening. So an example with a narcissist would be, I had a situation in my relationship where I was at breakfast with this individual and he was saying terrible things to me that made me cry. And I don't ever cry in public, or almost never. In this case, I couldn't help it. I was heartbroken, and we were in a restaurant. So I shut down and I just stopped talking to him. And then afterwards, and I couldn't finish my meal. And then afterwards we were leaving and he was asking me why I'm not talking. And I recounted all the terrible things that he just said. And he told me that that never happened. He said, I didn't say any of that stuff. He says, I swear on my mother's grave, which his mother was alive, so I guess that was telling. But I swear on my mother that that did not happen. And it had literally just happened 15 minutes before. Gaslighting. This is telling somebody that their experience is not actually happening. So a lot of times with racism, if you do make the mistake of sharing a racist incident with the wrong person of the dominant culture, they will inform you that, well, that wasn't really racist, or, well, I know that guy and he's really nice, or I'm sure you just misunderstood. That's a key one. All of these things they don't erase what happened. They only reinforce that not only did it happen, but they also can't trust you to talk about it because you are on the side of the person that hurt them. You are not on their side, so there is no reason for them to continue talking to you. Number 4 is lack of empathy. That is a key characteristic of narcissists, and that is one way you know for sure you're dealing with a narcissist. Narcissists don't feel bad about any of the things that they do. So when they hurt you, and you're upset by it, they may feel bad that you no longer want to talk to them, or they may feel bad that they've been rejected in some way. In other words, they feel bad about the consequences, but they don't feel bad that they actually hurt you. That's why they tell you stuff like it never happened, and that's why they continue doing what they do over and over again, because they don't actually care about how you feel. They just care about the results. And that incredible lack of empathy can be seen in racism when racist things happen, such as someone being shot by a police officer who was unarmed, and people will be like, well, I'm sure he was probably on drugs, or, well, we didn't see the whole thing, or basically just they don't care, and they're making it plain that it's just not something that concerns them. And they don't care that it happened. They don't care to stop it from happening again. They just simply don't care. Number 5 is magical thinking or irrational thinking. So this is the thing that is super crazy making. I don't know. I think it's less crazy making than gaslighting, but it's right up there. Because when you're dealing with somebody that is just irrational, there is no fixing it. And that's why if you're in a narcissistic relationship, and that's a whole nother topic, I can get into that at some other point if people are interested. And there's certainly plenty of material already out there about narcissism. But one of the key things and reasons why you have to get away from this person is that it's never going to be any different. Their way of thinking is irrational, and they have a tendency to fall into magical thinking. So they believe things that aren't based on any kind of evidence or any kind of history or any kind of reality. It's just they say the things that they want to happen, and not that they're going to make it happen through effort, because that is having a vision and that's positive. Magical thinking is just thinking something is going to happen with no effort, with nothing changing. Just somehow it's just going to magically happen. And the irrational thinking is, even if you try to get them to see the fallacy of what they're saying, doing, or believing, they just cling to it. So there is no talking with or reasoning with someone like that. So if somebody is hell-bent on being racist and they don't want to change and they don't believe that it's a big deal, then it's really, in my opinion, a waste of breath, especially for me as a person of color. If it's somebody that is part of your group, and maybe they're a family member or something, then you may have the leverage to continue trying. But it's useless for me as a Black woman to try to talk a racist person out of their racism. First of all, they're benefiting from it. Secondly, they don't have any life experience that would demonstrate to them that this is a problem. And then we go back to the lack of empathy. They just don't care. So when you're dealing with somebody that's irrational, and certainly believing that your race is inherently superior than someone else's is irrational. Now, sometimes people that are racist will try to point to things like, well, white people, have better neighborhoods, they have better schools, they have more money, so that's why they're better. But it's a catch-22. The reason why that's the case is because they have made sure that that's the case. So all of the things that have happened in history where when Black people have tried to better themselves and they've been thwarted at every turn by the white oppressive majority, they don't look at any of those things and they deny that any of those things happened, going back to gaslighting. And so it's not that Black people don't have the capability to have every single thing that white people have. It's just that white people don't want, and not all white people, I'm talking about, whenever I say this, I'm talking about racists, people that believe that their race is superior than other races. So the racist white majority thwarted those efforts and made sure that it didn't happen, denying, access to education, denying jobs, personal attacks, physical attacks, violence, all of these things have made sure, and then, infusing the neighborhoods with drugs, over policing to get people into the system so that they are effectively, nullified and void. They have no access to jobs if you have a record. And if you have a record for something little or minor that someone else would have been let go of, then you basically effectively have been blocked from ever bettering yourself. So they use as evidence the things that they've actually purposely created to say that they are superior. So this is the kind of irrationality that is very difficult to work with. Number 6 is future faking. So another characteristic of narcissistic relationships is that one of the ways they keep you on the hook is that they keep telling you that all of these wonderful things are going to happen in the future. All you have to do is hang in there, be patient. We're working on it. We're trying. It's getting better, blah, blah, blah. Future faking. Okay. And so that happens definitely when people are like, well, one day this and that and the other. And, and certainly this happened during the civil rights movement where even so-called Christians were telling Dr. Martin Luther King that, one day it'll all happen. It'll all come together. You just need to be patient. You don't need to push this right now. Of course, easy for them to say, yes, while you are enjoying your entire humanity, you people who do not get to enjoy your entire humanity, you guys just be patient. One day it'll all work out. Number 7 is lies. So a narcissist lies like it's a mother tongue. They lie about things that don't need to be lied about. They lie to make things look better than they are. And they lie it seems like just a sport. So certainly in support of racism, lies are a necessary component because any rational person would not be a racist. So it's not a matter of rational thinking. Lies go ahead and support the idea of the fallacy that you want to believe that you are superior to other people. So there are still in history books, this mythology that slavery wasn't that bad, that the slaves were happy, that they had access to food and protection, that they had the right to enjoy their lives, that this was a better thing for them, so on and so forth. And this is taught to children in the formative years. These are lies that are just baked into the institutions that we experience in America. So lies are a key component to both racism and narcissism. Number 8 is violence. Okay, so this is the dark side of racism and narcissism. And they are things that don't come to the surface until things are really pushed to the brink. So a narcissist, regardless of the type of narcissist, and there are different types, all of them are dangerous and all of them can be violent. So I hate to see people sort of say, well, I'm just going to stay with the narcissist because I can't afford to leave and, I'm used to it, and whatever excuse they have, or I'll just wait till the children grow up, or, whatever excuse they give to sort of not take the difficult action to extricate themselves from these relationships. The thing that makes me really upset when I hear that is that they are assuming that things are just going to stay the same and that they're not in danger. And that's not the case. So any narcissist can become violent because they are unimaginably self-absorbed, self-centered people. And whenever you get in between somebody and their sense of entitlement and their sense of self-importance, they can become violent. So whenever you try to leave a narcissist, for sure, you are messing with their image of themselves. So when you leave, you're essentially saying that there's something wrong with them, and there is. You're saying that there's something wrong with them, and they don't like that. And plus, they like having somebody else to get their jollies from putting down or getting praise and attention from. Either one is fine with them. So when you leave, you're taking that away from them, and they can become violent. So similarly with racism, the function of racism is to make the dominant culture feel better about itself at the expense of people of color. And so anytime that narrative gets disrupted, where Black people start achieving things, or like in the case of Barack Obama becoming the president, or articles that come out that say that white people will be a minority by 20 whatever, whatever the latest date is, that non-white people will be in the majority. All of these things serve to disrupt the narrative of superiority and dominance. And whenever, like I said, people that are self-entitled or have something taken away from them, they can become violent. So back in the day, during slavery, certainly murder was not even considered a crime if you murdered a Black person. But then even after slavery was over, you had lynchings, you had random violence, you had Emmett Till, you had police violence. I mean, it goes on and on and on, where Black people have been in danger because of this false narrative of white supremacy. And the last similarity between narcissism and racism is that the only way out of a narcissistic relationship is self-love and self-determination. That's where it starts. And then once that is the foundation, then there are a number of steps you can take to get out of it. Similarly with racism, it starts with self-love, and you can't, quote unquote, get out of racism, but you can neutralize its effect on you and your life, especially your mental health. Now, there are certain things that you can't do anything about. If you have a racist boss, or if somebody denied your application to an apartment, or if somebody undervalued your home, because that still happens. I mean, that happened recently where a person's home was falsely appraised tens of thousands of dollars under its value, which has direct economic implications and is also a pain in the ass. So you can't necessarily get out of racism unless you I guess, leave the country, although even then racism extends its tentacles all over the world. So while you can get out of it, you can neutralize its effect on your own mental health by practicing self-love. And no one can do that for you. So one of the other really sad byproducts of racism and narcissism is that the victim starts to doubt themselves. So with narcissistic relationships, a lot of the victims, eventually they start kind of believing the gaslighting. They think, well, maybe I did make it up. Maybe I am crazy. Maybe there's something wrong with me. And they start getting down on themselves. And what that does is strips you of the anger and the power and the motivation that you need to get up off of your ass and to fight back and to take back your life and to make your life the way you want it to be. Similarly with racism, a lot of it is internalized, and and this happens with sexism and all of the isms, but what happens is you start to turn that sickness and that mental illness of racism in on yourself, and you start thinking, well, maybe if I'm more like the dominant culture, then maybe they'll like me, or then maybe I'll be accepted. I need to not be who I am. I need to be somebody else. And that's very sad. It's very toxic way of thinking. And it's sort of like, they call it, in narcissistic relationships, they call it catching fleas, meaning that if you hang around a dog that has fleas, you're going to get some on you. So if you're hanging around narcissists if you're around racists too much, you're going to catch some of those fleas, the secondhand smoke I was talking about earlier. So one of the things you need to do is to curate the people that are around you. So don't be around narcissists to the extent that you can. Avoid racists as much as you can. And when you do have to deal with them, just remind yourself that they're sick people, that they're mentally ill, that they're irrational, and that they are narcissists of another form. And that will give you the distance that you need to not take it personally. Certainly, somebody not liking you is neither here nor there. People are allowed to do whatever they want to do. The only time it really matters is when this person tries to stop you from living your best life. That's when you have to fight back. That's when you have to do whatever it is you can do to neutralize their toxic behavior. But as far as their attitudes and all that kind of stuff, you don't want to let that affect your own mental health. And the key thing to do that, the key way to do that, in my opinion, is to not focus on it. Even though I'm sitting here talking about racism, I don't actually think about racists very much. I live in Texas, so every now and then you'll run into a real old school racist, but I don't care about those. Those people are sick. They believe in something that is dying and falling away. They believe in something that is counter to everything that is good in the world. And they have the right to do that. You can be sick and mentally ill if you choose to, because one of the things about narcissism is that it really isn't something that can be overcome. A narcissist is a narcissist, and they're going to live and die that way. The difference is with racism, it is something that you can overcome. And if you are interested in learning more about that, I highly recommend the book that I mentioned earlier, I See Color by Robert Pellegrino. If you are a person that wants to know more about racism, I think it's a key primer for getting to the bottom at some of the issues that are involved with dealing with racism as a white person. As far as dealing with it as a person of color, self-love is the way to go. So do not pay attention to all of the forces that want to tell you that you are inferior. So that means curating the things that you watch. So if you're watching a lot of things that have all white cast, for example, that's another way of brainwashing the populace to believe that white people are the kind of the default and the normal people. And whenever there's black people on the screen, there's got to be some sort of reason for them to be there. Like they're not just regular human beings, like their race is some sort of a key component of the storyline. So anytime you see that, like even if you're in the middle of the movie, like you can just shut it off if you're alone. If you're with other people, just make sure you make a note to yourself that that's racism in action. So you're just becoming aware of it. You don't make it the central focus of your life. Instead, you stay away from it as much as possible and you focus on who God has created you to be. Or if you don't believe in God, nature. You were born this way and there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with you being a woman. There's nothing wrong with you being gay. There's nothing wrong with you being black. There's nothing wrong with you being the way you were made. And to say anything else is to have a problem with the maker, not with you. You didn't ask to be born this way. You just had the blessings and the privilege to be born this way. So celebrate it. And don't let anybody tell you anything different. You are born the way you are for a purpose and a reason. It is beautiful. It is blessed. It can be used to bring joy and light to the world that so needs it. So practice self-love as an act of radicalism. If you want to be political, that's the best way to be political. Love yourself radically. Don't listen to anybody that tells you you are less than 100% made in the image of God. All right, well, that's all I have for you today. I will be talking more about my work as the weeks go on. I decided to make this podcast more about my actual act of creation because a lot of these issues find themselves into my art, so it makes sense to discuss them as a topic of the show. So until next time, have a beautiful and productive week, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye. 'Cause I've been living life